Tantor Audio presents The Jewel House, Elizabethan London and the Scientific Revolution by Deborah E. Harkness, narrated by Kate Redding. It is the manner of men first to wonder that any such thing should be possible, and after it is found out, to wonder again how the world should miss it so long. Francis Bacon, after Titus Livius, Valerius Terminus, 1603. A note about science. Some listeners may take issue with my use of the apparently anachronistic collective term science to describe the varied Elizabethan interest in nature as it was expressed in London. After all, the Oxford English Dictionary does not report science as a term designating the mathematical and physical study of nature as having come into use until the middle of the 19th century. I myself was trained to call the early modern interest in nature natural philosophy, since it was not laboratory-based, experimental, palpably modern science. But natural philosophy, I had also been taught, was an elite set of interests, founded in Aristotelian and anti-Aristotelian currents, informed by the new scholarship of humanism, and practiced by gentlemen and scholars with the free time and material resources required to contemplate nature. This definition did not seem to fit the background of the Londoners whose stories appear in this book, or to convey their aspirations to put nature to productive and profitable ends. Science was emerging in 16th-century English vernacular usage as an umbrella term to cover scores of such smaller, more easily described interests in specific aspects of the natural world as viticulture, alchemy, mining, and mathematics. From as early in Elizabeth's reign as 1559, when William Cunningham characterized mechanical invention as science, to the end when Ralph Robards signed off on his translation of an alchemical text, yours in the furtherance of science, the term was used to denote both a study of the natural world and a manipulation of the natural world for productive and profitable ends. Sometimes it was linked explicitly with nature, as when Cunningham identified cosmography as the most excellent of all the other natural sciences, and Thomas Charnock's Breviary of Natural Philosophy listed the names and uses for all vessels and all instruments in this science of alchemy. John Securus helpfully defined the term in his Detection and Querimony of the Daily Enormities and Abuses Committed in Physic. Science is a habit, a ready, prompt, and bent disposition to do anything confirmed and had by long study, exercise, and use. A wide range of Elizabethans used the collective term science to describe their interest in properties of the natural world, or their efforts to manipulate and control those properties. In works published or republished during the age of Elizabeth, Leonard Digges used the mathematical sciences to identify the contemporary interest in astronomy, astrology, instrumentation, arithmetic, and geometry, as did John Dee, John Blagrave, and William Bourne. The Queen voiced her support for all good sciences and wise and learned inventions, and letters patent were issued under her name for technological experts in the science of furnace manufacturing, as well as the science of glass-making. Humphrey Baker promised that he had more ready knowledge in this science of mathematics than most others in England. Donald Lupton, writing about London, called it a centre of all sciences, arts, and trades, indicating that by the early 17th century there were some who were already teasing out the differences between these forms of inquiry and practice. The surgeon George Baker commended Italian and French writers for putting their knowledge of surgical science in the vernacular. His fellow surgeon William Clowes placed medicine and surgery among the sciences and instructed his readers to observe the boundaries that divided science from science. And Francis Bacon looked forward to the time when Englishmen would develop sciences unknown. My research uncovered that English vernacular writers on natural history, medicine, mathematics, instrumentation, mechanics, and chemistry used the word science throughout the Elizabethan period, both as a collective term and to denote individual sciences. The word appears most often among mathematical and medical authors, but it also creeps into the Crown's language for the letters patent issued for technological inventions, into the works of popular authors like Donald Lupton, who were not writing on science but on the City of London, and even into the Queen's official pronouncements on inventions and monopolies. By contrast, very few of the Elizabethans I studied described their work as natural philosophy, nor did they use any of the other terms that have been suggested to me as more historically sensitive alternatives to the word science, including productive knowledge, imitating nature, or utility for the common good. And so I had to make a choice whether to use the collective term at least some of my historical subjects used to describe their efforts, or to adopt a term that none of them used, but which most historians of science insist is correct and more historically nuanced. I decided to use science, just as my subjects did, because this struck me as the least anachronistic alternative. During the Elizabethan period, residents of London were developing an urban sensibility toward the natural world that historians today might fruitfully call vernacular science. As this study shows, vernacular science was based in urban ways of knowing and evaluating nature that came from the densely overlapping social worlds of the city. As such, it was distinct from the approach to natural knowledge taught at the university, or the genteel culture shared by gentlemen and gentlewomen at court who might be interested in the natural world. Like vernacular architecture, vernacular science bore some resemblance to the high-culture natural philosophy and intellectual pretensions of both the university and the court, but it had different priorities. Observation was privileged over tradition, for example, different forms of expression. Sharing experiments was preferred to sharing theoretical knowledge, and different values. Dispute and questioning was accepted as a routine aspect of the business of science. Throughout this book you will find evidence of a contemporary 16th-century use of this collective term. Extrapolating from these examples, I also use science throughout as a shorthand collective term to denote Elizabethan Londoners' interest in understanding and exploiting nature, even when the individuals in question did not do so. Quentin Skinner has argued that concepts can exist before the word that has come to designate them. This case is a bit more complicated, since the word science came into usage along with some concept of the natural sciences before we have been willing to admit that it did. This odd state of affairs is evident in the often mentioned but seldom quoted earliest definition for science in the Oxford English Dictionary. In 1867, W.G. Ward is given credit for coining this particular collective usage for science when he wrote, "We shall use the word science in the sense which Englishmen so commonly give to it, as expressing physical and experimental science to the exclusion of theological and metaphysical." It would seem that what was common among Englishmen in the 19th century was equally common in the 16th century. Similar problems of anachronistic terminology developed when it came time to discuss individual students of nature, and to describe their activities in a way that would be consistent and meaningful to a modern reader, as well as accurate within an early modern Elizabethan context. Because I found no Elizabethan usage of the term scientist to describe a student of nature, I do not use the word unless I am...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?